We've got 2 oil analysis from a high output Hurricane, 2 different engines and a break-in. And then we've got a standard output Hurricane that has followed a procedure that I'm going to let Car Guy go into this. But the whole goal today is to look at the details of where the oil analysis came for 2 different vehicles, different drive cycles, so that you can decide what makes most sense for you to use for your engine and your engine break-in and oil viscosities. And then think about what more so you could do around your driving conditions, where you live. Do you live in northern Canada, or do you live in Texas where it's warm? This all impacts. Are you in a dirty road? Are you in dry climates? Let's just get started here. So on the left, we have the Car Guy online. It's a 2026 Ram Rebel. And then on the right, both these were done by Blackstone Laboratories. What's cool is we've got my data from my original 2025 Ram 1500 RHO and my 2026 RHO. Now, I'm going to let Car Guy Online kind of go into why you decided to kind of go this path you did.
Yeah, I think the first thing to really discuss is should you change your oil like on the schedule that Motor Oil Geek says to. So it's, if you're doing a break-in like the Motor Oil Geek prescribes, it's 500 miles, 1,500 miles, I think 3,000 miles and 5,000 miles. Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm trying out. So I want to compare that to Barry's RHOs, because Barry's taken a more traditional method. Like, is it really worth changing your oil at 500 miles? I mean, it's a cost. It's not a huge cost, but it's a pain in the butt. And a lot of people don't want to do it. So we're just trying to compare. And there's a difference here. Yours is 0.40, mine's 0.20. I think you could kind of extrapolate out, like maybe I would have been at higher metal wear in mine on 0.20 than you were, and your viscosity is still higher. So that'll be interesting to look at this.
Yep, for sure. This will be fun. All right, let's start with yours, and let's look at the data. Do you want to start? So you did this at 500, is it 500 or 600 miles?
600 miles. Yep, I was a little over.
Okay. And you did this back in November. On the right, the universal averages are what Blackstone would put, right, for this engine. Isn't that typically how they do it?
Yeah, so the universal averages on the right would be if I was going through like a 4,000 or 5,000 mile oil change. Okay. That's what my aluminum, my iron, my copper should be at after a full oil change interval, where mine was essentially a little bit higher than their recommended universal averages at 500 or 600 miles. So I think that, and I did a video on this, I think that kind of shows that the Motor Oil Geek is spot on, where it's beneficial for your engine to get this stuff out and to cycle it out faster and just keep cleaner oil in your system, because it's kind of proof here that I already have more parts per million of iron, aluminum. Those are the ones I care about. I just highlighted those because I care about, the iron, the piston rings, the aluminum, like things that are
connecting rods.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I don't want that floating around and then, scuffing up the bearings or whatever. So that's why I care about it in the break-in. I'll probably do 5,000 mile oil changes after this break-in, but that's what we're trying to figure out. Is it worth it or not?
Yep. So my understanding is when I see silicone, I believe that's part of like what's in the RTVs and the sealants for the engine. So I understand, like, when they're assembling the engines, it's not uncommon to see silicone in the first few engine oil changes, or if you've had a repair on an engine, I've heard, you'll see it spike up too. I'm looking at your numbers here, and it's really interesting when we look at my aluminum numbers. What's interesting is both engines had the same amount of aluminum. Identical numbers.
Yeah.
You have, so I've got technically 50% more aluminum in it than yours, because you're at 6, I'm at 9 parts. Yeah. We both had the same chromium. Iron, you had half the amount of the iron in it. And once again, the other thing that's interesting is mine is at 20 for both trucks. Where we see a difference, though, is on the copper. It shows a little bit more copper in the 2026 versus the 2025. And it's interesting when we compare that to the universal averages, those numbers are quite a bit higher. And yours is too, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I've read that, and I think there's something to do with the way Stellantis builds. I don't know if it's the oil cooler or heat exchanger or what, but
Okay.
there's a high level of copper in it. And they essentially, what I read was, don't worry about it if you're in a Ram or Stellantis product. I
Okay.
haven't really dug into it though, so I don't want to say too much about that. But it didn't worry me as much after I read about it.
Good. It'll be fun when we do our next oil change. Since I did this analysis at 3,550 miles on my 26, I think I'm at like 4,300. So we'll be getting some miles on this soon. And I'm almost tempted to do it again at like 3,500 miles just to see where that would be. But both our lead was 0. But I've shown a little bit of 10 in, I mean, it's one part. But look at the molybdenum.
Yep. Yeah, moly is probably more in the oil itself.
Okay.
I don't think, that's why I kind of ignore a lot of the other.
It's kind of an additive, I believe, right?
From what I understand, and we should get the Motor Oil Geek on to see if he would,
that'd be fun.
Us, because I'm sure he could clear up more. I know he's done a lot of oil analysis videos, but it would be really cool to see him walk through our vehicles and explain it to us. But I don't worry about as much other than the aluminum, iron, maybe the copper later on after our break-in, and silicone, and then the viscosity. I think it's fair to say that mine was at 600 miles, so I've done 1/4 of the driving you've done, but I have half the amount of metals in my oil, and sometimes a little over half. So it's interesting. If I would have gone 3,500 miles, would I be way above yours? It's really hard to know. But when you look at the viscosity at the bottom, at 210 degrees, that's what I care about, because these Rams and all these twin turbo motors, they run at like 200 plus degrees. Just that's what they want to get them to. That's where they're most efficient, going to get better mileage. So this oil gets cooked, especially if you're towing. And you towed, like you were much harder on your vehicle than I was.
Yep.
I babied this thing. So is that the 0W20 versus 040? And yours did hold up really well. Your viscosity held up really well.
Yeah, because I probably got over 1,000 miles towing on both of those trucks. But it's interesting though to see. It looks at, if I look at yours, the 0W20, it's saying yours, I'm assuming, is going to be in like a 52 range as far as the nominal spec for your viscosity, and you're at 51. So you're still in spec for that number.
Well, it's only 600 miles though.
That's true. That's true. But it's interesting though, when you look at mine, both trucks, where one was at 59.7 and one was at 60, that's really close, but both are technically, according to Blackstone, as their universal averages, is a little bit light, about 5% below their minimum, I would say. But still, like you said, 50 versus 60, it's still 20% higher oil viscosity than your 0W20.
Yeah, I mean, in your case, I probably would have changed the oil a little sooner. Like maybe it'd be 1,500 miles in the RHO, or if you're following my protocol, it would have been interesting to see too, or the Motor Oil Geeks protocol. But I think it's just interesting to look at. Yours isn't as bad maybe as what I would have assumed, given the towing and putting it under stress. I think it's still pretty good in spec for a break-in. But I think the Motor Oil Geek is shooting for perfect, right? Like what's the perfect break-in,
right?
To really increase the longevity of your engine at like 200,000. That's probably what he's thinking.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it makes sense. And ever since he did that video, I've been talking to people and different powertrain engineers, and they all say the exact same thing. Man, if I was going to buy an engine to make it last forever, I would probably do a few oil changes really soon and early into the engine's life, and that will pay big dividends back to your, longevity of the engine.
Yeah.
I know we don't want to belabor this point because you and I've harped on this a bunch, but imagine what the situation with the GM 6.2 liter would look like if people were doing oil changes at the first 1,000 miles. That'd be interesting.
Yeah, it depends on how far out of spec those crankshafts are, right?
Yeah, exactly. The other thing I always keep an eye on with direct injected engines, especially boosted ones, is fuel dilution. And you see the spec of less than 2%, and you're at less than 5.5%, and I'm at less than 0.5%. And it's interesting is I was 1.5% before.
And didn't you say you had misfires and stuff in that first one?
I did not. I did not have a
Okay.
misfire, but I know people that have. I think TRD John had an issue with like a purge solenoid and his RHO. But when I see this fuel dilution thing, my first thought is I almost believe, is this an engine calibration change from 25 to 26? Could they have dialed in the tuning a little bit more where there's less fuel dilution? Because the only way that would happen, I don't know. I mean, I'm speculating, but I'm trying to think of things that would reduce fuel dilution. And one would be calibration. And then obviously if there's something changed with piston rings or cylinder surface or something, but it's all tied to that.
Yeah, and yours is, I mean, that's pretty good for towing. You would expect more fuel dilution, I would think, because you're really dumping in the boost and gas.
Yeah, true.
So that's good. I mean, I think it's great.
Yep. The other things I've heard is I believe zinc is an additive, and my understanding, it's good for your engine actually to have more zinc in the oil, but I think it's more bad from a pollutant standpoint. But I'm kind of glad to see some of these numbers. It looked like both of these, all of them were pretty good as far as in that zinc area.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing that I think you mentioned at the beginning of the video, looking at this, so Barry lives in a really cold climate in the winter and probably gets pretty decently hot in the summer, but you're kind of all over the place for climate. I am in Colorado. But man, if you lived in Canada versus Texas, like how would you approach this? I might consider a 0W or 5W30 in Texas, where I probably wouldn't consider a 5W30 in Colorado or where you're at, or Canada, where you're going to get -20, -30. If you get down to -15 or 20 consistently, it's just, I wouldn't do it. I'd do a 0W40. So I think that was another thing the Motor Oil Geek talked about, was how specific it is to like choose your right oil and do a couple oil analysis and then look at where you live, the climate, your vehicle, your engine design, and then make the decision for yourself, because we can't just prescribe what oil you should use. It's kind of seasonal and location based.
So when you look at all this, looking at yours, looking at mine, what's your thoughts on the Motor Oil Geek break-in, and what's your thoughts on the 0W40 versus 0W20? What would you think?
I think I've made up my mind. I'm going to do one more oil analysis with the 0W20. So I use Pennzoil Ultra Platinum. I'll do probably in another 200 miles doing another oil analysis with the 020, see if it's going down, if the metals are trending down. And then once I get to probably 3,000 or 5,000, whenever it kind of stabilizes, I'm moving to 040, because in Colorado, people don't know this, it gets really hot. It's like during the summer, spring, we can get 100-degree days. It gets really warm. It's not as cold as people think. And in the winter, I'm in the garage, so I don't see a lot of cold temperatures, but even with 040, I'd be fine. I'd rather have a higher viscosity for the heat, or if I tow in the summer, than 0W20. And TFL did a great test up their toaster trail here with the Ram Hurricane, and it did great. It was like the only engine that really passed up until the end. And when you look at what happened, their oil got so hot on the towing test up the mountains that it just ended up thinning out to where they had an oil light come on the dash, because it was so hot. It was probably like 270 degrees on the oil, and you put 020 at 270 degrees or something, and it's going to be pretty thin. You're going to have low oil pressure. So for me personally, I'm going 040. I think the Motor Oil Geek's prescription is perfect, at least from what I've seen on this vehicle. I already have the number of metals, the parts per million that you would normally have in a 4,500 mile interval. So he's kind of right. You just change it at 500, change it at 1,500, and then just kind of go normal schedule after 3,000. So I like it.
So does it make you want to go and change, say, your differentials or transfer case now and getting that break-in fluids out?
A little, because those are cheap.
Yeah, I know.
It's super easy to do. And I mean, these trucks, you just crawl under them. I don't even need a creeper. I just sling under it and do the work, and I'm done.
Yep.
So it does. Yeah. Because it's so cheap to do.
Yep.
It's a little bit of a pain, but mine was a little different because I didn't change the oil filter. So I the 500-mile oil change and the 1500-mile, the Motor Oil Geek says, leave your filter in. It actually filters better when it's got a little bit of stuff in it,
Yep.
So that makes sense. I'll see how it goes when I do a full filter change.
Well, it'll be fun. You're going to have to start driving more. And so we can try to do this again at similar miles.
Don't drive it enough, man. I shouldn't have bought
it. No, it'll be cool to do this again because you and I are running the exact same oil, except we're both running the Platinum Pennzoil, whatever, except I'm doing a 0W40 and you're a 0W20. So I'm really curious to see where these numbers come back on in the next oil change.
Yeah, and I think the engine type matters. When you're looking at these twin turbo engines, it is, to me, important to have higher viscosity. What is your oil pressure when your truck's good and hot and you're idling? Like the lowest oil pressure I see in the standard output Hurricane is like 20 to 24. I never see below 20 PSI. And the reason I ask is because these Tundra guys and other people, these other truck owners, I see them monitoring their oil pressure and they'll get down into like 7 PSI, 15 PSI. And wouldn't it be interesting if the whole issue with the Tundra was they just rode that line too low, just not enough oil pressure.
So I'm typically at a warm idle between 20 and 22 PSI. I found a cold startup the other day. I noticed I was at 50. I think I was at 50 almost immediately. I was like, wow, that's a big difference. When I'm going down the road, I found the oil pressure, specifically towing, is boost specific. So if I'm at like 60 towing, I feel like I'm like 25 to maybe 30 PSI. But if I jump it up to 70 towing, I'm like 42, almost 42 consistent PSI going down the road, 40 to 44.
Yeah, which is awesome.
Yeah, I think that's fine. Yeah, I don't see any issue there.
I would much rather have it higher.
Yeah, right.
I don't care.
Well, what's funny is, and I'd love to get people's comments when we do this down below. A lot of people would actually say these numbers are low for oil pressure. People look at older V8s and say there used to be a rule of thumb of 10 PSI per every 1,000 RPMs. So at 2,000 RPMs, you should be 20, at 3,000, 30, 4,000, and so on. So, and I used to see something kind of similar I had a Z06 Corvette with I think it was the LS7, the 427 motor. And I would see, if you're really getting on it, you'd see 60, 70 PSI at the higher RPMs. But I've also heard from different powertrain engineers that oil pressure is more specific on the design of the engine than the health of the engine. So some people would look at maybe the Hurricane engines and say this is a little lower than they'd like, but they can actually design the crank and the journal where you don't have as much sloshing around or something, how it was explained to me, and have lower oil pressure. So I don't know. That's for the experts. It's kind of interesting though.
Yeah. For me, when you get these twin turbo V6 designs or inline six designs, and they put out, we're pushing 500 foot-pounds of torque out of 3 liters. And yours is over that. You have so high, your cylinder pressure is extremely high. It's more stress on the crank, more stress on the bearings. Like that torque has to go through the bearing system. And when you think about the leverage of a piston on the crankshaft, it doesn't surprise me that, if you had an oiling problem or a viscosity problem, it would just get exposed that much faster on these engines.
Aren't you glad that we've got an inline six, which has got more ability to transfer the load through the bearings versus say a V6 or a V8?
Huge deal. When you look at how much bearing surface do we have on an inline six, we have probably more than a V8.
Yeah, I would agree.
So
agreed.
And people don't ever consider that because they never really had to. But now that a lot of engines are struggling with main bearing issues, Toyota, GM, start to think about it a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. Yep. Well, it'll be fun to revisit this. We'll have to do this again. I'm really curious because my next report will have a lot of winter use as far as yours as well. So I'll be curious to see where these calcium levels are at. And like you said, the copper and iron and aluminum. It'll be kind of fun to see that. And like you said, I almost think, do we do a third one? And especially yours, if you jump to 0W40, man, that's going to be really fun to compare.
Yeah. I want to compare 0W40 to 0W20, but I need to make sure that it's kind of stabilized, which is a bummer for me because I don't drive like you do.
Yeah.
So it takes me a little longer to get
a few
there.
years at this rate.
Oh my gosh. I need to, I make up excuses to like, I got to go to Walmart for something. What do I need? I'll come up with something. Yeah.
Well, I definitely think that if people have questions on what oils to use and some of this, I hope this is helpful for the people that are getting Hurricane engines or have it or looking at it. But even more so, man, follow your manual. And in full fairness, if that video with the Motor Oil Geek would have came out about a month and a half earlier, I probably would have changed my oil at about 1,000 miles or so as well, because it's like, it's not that hard to do an oil change when these things are simple. And so it's easy. And the other cool thing, I know some people miss the dipstick, and I agree. I wish that was there as well. But I didn't use any oil. No oil was lost on either one of these trucks in an oil change. Zero oil consumption. And compared to some of the other engines out there right now, what are we hearing specs of? A quart every 1,000 miles is considered, I think that's considered normal.
GM. Yeah. And it's not all of them, but I do see horror stories of that. Even with, you said in the 2.7 liter GM, as it gets higher mileage, a lot of this, who knows if it's direct injection and the piston rings and you get carbon buildup and it just eventually kind of starts to, burn a little more oil in the cylinder walls. But a quart every 1,000 miles is ridiculous. And for them to say that it's normal, I just don't agree.
Yeah, I agree. I totally agree with you. Hey, on another topic, are you running an oil catch can?
Yes. I'm going to do a video on that soon.
Okay. All right. We don't want to spoil the surprise on that. I am not, but
it's not anything. It's what you'd expect. I would recommend a catch can for anyone because when I put it on at about 800 miles, and I've only put like 400 or 500 miles on the catch can, and I already have oil in the bottom of it that you can see in the catch can that's, accumulating. So I would imagine through one oil change, I'm probably going to have a quarter or half of that catch can full of oil.
Yeah.
And it's really clean oil, but I don't want that going back on my valves.
Yeah, for sure.
I do not want it going back in that part of the cylinder. So for me, it just makes absolutely no sense to not run a catch can. However, you do have to set your, however much you drive, you got to be like a monthly reminder on your iPhone. Hey, remind me to check my catch can. And empty it. That's the hassle of it. But
it'd be fun if I've got a bore scope. I don't know if you've got one, and I don't know how much effort it'd take, but man, if we could sneak a bore scope down and look at our intake valves on both trucks at say 10,000 miles and see how they compare. Maybe I'll just keep a catch can off just to kind of compare to yours too. That's another thought.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. I don't know how hard it would be to get down there to look at the valves, but I haven't looked. I pulled the top cover of the engine off to put the catch can in, but it was really easy to do. So only like a 10 or 15 minute install.
Yeah. So any other thoughts on the Hurricane engine? Have you saw any weird anomalies, cold start issues, valve train noise issues, or anything that kind of caught you off guard so far?
No, it's probably, it's the only powertrain I would consider in a half ton right now.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have bought it, with my own money if I didn't think it was the best. And I'm not a Ram person. You weren't a Ram person either. I just look at the forged internals, even on the standard output. There really isn't a lot of difference on the internals. You have larger turbos, more boost, but it's like the forged internals on the standard output are pretty impressive.
I agree.
I think the power is a little underrated almost in the, I look at it as, why do you need more power than this in a half ton? At that point, just go to a 3/4 ton. Because if you need more power than what these put out, you're probably towing something that a half ton can't handle anyway.
I agree. I totally agree on all that, because I've said all along, the standard output feels strong. It doesn't feel like there's 120 horsepower more at the high output versus the standard output. And I mimic your thoughts. I mean, we just towed with a Power Stroke diesel, and I just look at the other gas engines out. There's some really good ones out, like the L8T, the 6.6, I think GM. I think that's a really solid one. The seems like the Ram 6.4 seems to be pretty durable as well. And then obviously the Godzilla. But if you look at the numbers they produce for torque and horsepower, it's not really any different than the Hurricane engine. So at that point, if I was going to go, do you go simplicity? Because honestly, the advantage to those engines, especially the Godzilla, it's just simple. It's a simple pushrod engine, and I really like that. But man, that power stroke I just did, I forgot how impressive that thing is with towing. Jeez, oh Pete's, spoiled me. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, they're good. They're just looking at like JB's videos with the weight loss program, you know, on the diesels. It's like, I don't want to do that. I don't want to rip all that stuff off to make it happy. And it,
good point.
It costs a lot, you know, they cost a lot. I think the resale value would probably be better on a high mileage diesel than anything, but, or even the high mileage gas 3/4 tons right now, they're offering pretty good deals. It's just, if you're looking for a half ton, if you want the ride quality of a half ton, I can't, and you're going half ton, you're not considering 3/4 tons. I can't imagine buying anything else at this point, because I can deal with the CarPlay issues. Maybe it's going to annoy the crap out of me, but at least the thing's not dying on the side of the road. Most of them aren't. The most I see is dead batteries in the Facebook groups. I've been scouring them looking for engine failures or anything, and it's always the same thing. They'll have a dead battery here and there. And sometimes fuses aren't seated or whatever. It's like it's electrical gremlins, but really they always kind of come back to the battery and voltage.
Well, I hope it's a good engine for everybody. You know, this is what I tell people all the time. You don't have to be a Ram fan, but you want Ram to be doing good, because if they are, it's one more competitor to make everybody compete and bring better products to market. So it's like Toyota. I'm not a big Toyota person, but I want them to do well, because if they do well, that's one more competitor to help keep the prices down on all the brands. So I want them to actually have a great engine and a great success.
If Toyota would have come out with the Hurricane style, it would have been, everybody would have said it was the 2JZ of the, you know, the Toyota Tundra.
Right. Yeah. 100%.
And they would have, right now, I think the Tundra, if they had done that and it was reliable and not grenading, I really think the Tundra would have overtaken Ram. I think they would be nipping at the heels of, like, in a couple years, because they sold a lot of second or third gen Tundras, the new body. Everybody liked the new body style, the new creature comforts, all that. The ride quality, it's the engines that's starting to put people off when you're going on year 4 or 5 of the same failures. It's like, it just gives people pause. So Tundra numbers were down 7%, I think, and everybody else is kind of going up. So
you think we'll see more inline 6-cylinder gas engines in the future?
I don't know why manufacturers don't like them. I don't know if it's the, I was surprised to see the Hurricane, them go that route in the Ram. It just seems like the people love them for the vibration. I mean, they're so quiet. They drive like an electric vehicle. They're so quiet. But I don't know why manufacturers seem to not like them. They favor more complex designs like these V6s and V8s. I don't know why they would want to have 4 cams and 2 sets of timing chains on each end. Like, it's so much more complex. You got to have all the tensioners, it's so much worse than an inline engine, whether you have an inline 4 or an inline 6. It's just better for longevity, I think. And I don't know why they don't do it. Maybe it's the space under the hood. They suck up space.
I've heard packaging was really why the V8s came out back in the day, was because they didn't have enough room to get straight inline motors in place. And I heard a few years ago, the reason the RHO ran the 8HP 75 transmission versus the 95 series is because the Hurricane engine, I want to say, was 2 inches longer than the Hellcat, the 6.2 and the V8. So they had to come up with space, basically, and the 8HP transmission was about that much shorter. So to keep the packaging all in place, it was easier to run a shorter bell housing transmission. So I'd be curious if one of the powertrain people were watching, if that's true or not, but the math made sense to me. I could sort of see that. So
yeah, I love inline 6s. I always have, even in the old, the BMWs.
Ford 300, remember? I don't know if you ever had one of those, the old school natural aspirated.
My dad did, I think. Yeah.
Dude, they were like bulletproof. It was like a 4.9 liter. They made like no power and they got horrible fuel economy, but they didn't break.
Yeah.
And I think the thing that's interesting, a lot of people know, but I saw this growing up as a kid, that inline 6-cylinder was an engine option, natural aspirated inline gas 6-cylinder in an F250, not just a 150. So if people say a 6-cylinder doesn't have enough money, that 6-cylinder natural aspirated Ford had was one of the best engines they ever made for reliability.
Yeah. Well, people are spoiled nowadays. We have 500 foot-pounds of torque and half tons, and that used to be diesel territory 20 years ago. So
that's true. Yeah. 100%. Yep.
Yeah.
Well, this is cool. I'm looking forward to us recapping and doing this again here in a few months. And well, hopefully you can put some miles on. I'll be catching up. I'll probably be at 6,000, 7,000 real quick. So
you'll probably be at 10 when I'm at 3.
Yeah, probably. You have to drive to Michigan.
I know. I need to take some trips.
Yep.
We'll keep everyone up to date.
Cool. Thanks, everybody.